Hello everyone, I am Zia Kazi, PT Neuro student. I am very fascinated with the brain, so I thought let's do a topic on brain. This is one of the images that always inspires me about how intricate and amazing the brain is and how delicately yet beautifully it works to keep us in balance. I was always fascinated by how the brain works, how just a blob of tissue can take over everything you're doing. We are going to see how to read or interpret a CT or MRI, brain scan to be specific, not other scans. I'm just doing brain today, made easy for physiotherapists. Coming to the outline of what I'll be talking today, I'll just be in brief telling about what is a CT and an MRI, the indications of why a CT and MRI is done, and why do we need to know CT and MRI as physiotherapists, what are the essential concepts in it, and then we'll go on to discussing cases and brain lesions with a systematic reading of the scans. Coming to what are CT and MRI. CT and MRI basically are radiological imaging techniques or investigations as we call it, used in everyday medical practice. But the basic difference is CT works on radiation. It is like an advanced X-ray which gives you a HD image of an X-ray scan per se. And MRI is like a huge magnet that works on magnetic technology, but both break down segments of the body in slices and minute forms to recreate 2D or 3D images. So both give multiple slices, planes or section of a body tissue. Both are available in 2D and can be reconstructed into 3D. Such as a neurological condition that we commonly see as physiotherapists in the clinical setup, such as stroke, seizures, brain tumors, hydrocephalus sometimes, and syncopal attacks, and also accidents and trauma. So why do we need to study? I mean, we are used to being given diagnosis, right? Whenever we see a patient, if the patient is already diagnosed, the reports are already there. But why do we as physiotherapists need to learn this? Okay, I have come across three main points that we need to, those are essential or important for us regarding the scans and the investigation. One is knowledge and perspective. Whenever you go see a report, it will tell you the patient has a head injury, it is a subarachnoid hemorrhage or subdural hematoma. What does that mean actually? What is happening to the brain? What is your perspective over it? We never know what is happening to the brain tissue. We never see the brain tissue. So the essentiality of learning how to see a scan or knowing how to read a scan or interpret it, or just go see a scan and know, okay, this is how an SGH looks, this is how hydrocephalus looks, this is how a tumor looks, okay, this can be stroke, is really important. The second thing is confidence. Is the bleed in some area where even though it is small but has a very large effect on functionality, or some area which the bleed may be present but need not be compromising the function of the patient. So that confident for you to treat the patient is also a important factor. When you know to read the scans, or when you know you can see the brain images and say, okay, this bleed is in some area where the functionality is compromised, maybe I should go slow with the rehabilitation. That decision making is very essential. The world is becoming more and more competitive, so you'll always have to be at an edge. You'll have to be a little further in steps than the other. So competency is a huge thing that all of us as physiotherapists need to understand. We should take as much knowledge as we can, become more confident, and with it become more competent in the field. Coming to essential concepts for reading the CT scans, I won't take much time. There are three essential concepts that we need to know coming to the scan. One is Hounsfield units, the second is windowing, the third is planes or sections of the brain. There is the axial section, also called a transverse section. There is a coronal section going front to back, and there is a sagittal section going from side to side. Okay, coming to the Hounsfield units that I talked about. Hounsfield units basically are the units given to a color gradient in the CT scan. As you can see, air is -1000 and metal or bone is +1000. So the more dense the tissue is, the more whiter. The more dense the tissue is, the more whiter it appears on a CT scan. The less dense it is, the least dense being air, the more blacker it appears. All the blood and soft tissue appear in between as grey shades. So windowing is a spectrum of Hounsfield units that is taken or put at the time of one scan or changed accordingly so that different tissues, and there are soft tissue windows such as blood window, brain window, muscle window, lung window. I'll just discuss cases with you so that it will be a more practical approach. Okay. So there is this is a 3-step method that which I personally follow to interpret the scan. You can also follow the same or some other methods. There are various methods available. Okay, sticking to this method, the 3-step method is you first see the structures in the scan, then you see the symmetry in the scan, then you see the abnormality in the scan. When you put all together, it will be easier for you to diagnose or understand what the lesion is. Okay, so there is structure, symmetry and abnormality. Okay, going to a normal brain scan, we'll see how it looks. You can see the different color gradients very well. The sinuses are completely black, air filled, bone is completely white, most dense, and all the rest of the tissue is completely grayish. So it is called, it has terms. The more whiter it is called hyperdense. The more blacker or grayer it is called hypodense, and anything that seems similar to the tissue color of the brain is called isodense. So brain has a isodense color, bone is hyperdense and air is hypodense. You need to remember these 3 terminologies whenever you are reporting the scans. Okay, now starting with this is a normal scan. So we'll follow the same 3-step method. First we'll see the structures, then we'll see the symmetry, and then we'll see if there is any abnormality. Okay, starting with the color gradients. You see bone appears bright white, okay, and all the soft tissues appear gray. This is the first section of the scan. It is at the level of C2. How do you determine it is at the level of C2? How do you know this is C2 for sure? One drastic differentiating point is the bifid spinous process. As you can see there, as this is the vertebra, and if you see the spinous process there, you see it is bifid. So you are sure this is C2. You see the spinous process there, then in the spinal canal you see the spinal cord, gray matter and white matter, and at the front you see the body of the C2. You see the nasal canal or the nasopharynx opening just in front of the body of the C2, which further descends down as the throat. Then in the front you see the upper, the C2 corresponds to the level of the upper palate. So you see the upper palate and the buccal cavity here hazy black. You see the nasopharynx completely blackened out because there is just air there. All the soft tissues appear gray. Now this is a CT. How do you tell this is a CT? One thing is it is all blurred out. You can see the bone clearly, but the soft tissues are just blurred out grayish. They are not clear. If this was an MRI, I'll show you an MRI later. Everything is much more clearer. You can also make out soft tissues very well, the attachments very well, the spinal cord, the teeth, the buccal cavity, everything on the scan you can see very well. Okay, now coming back to structures, the 2 bones, the bifid spinous process, confirming this is C2, the spinal cord, the body of the C2, then just in front you see the nasopharynx hollow black because air filled. Then at the either side you see this bone. This is the mandible. Okay, this is the mandible, more like the both segments of the mandible bilaterally. Okay, we'll go just above. Okay, this is one section above. One section above, you can see the arch. You can still see the bifid spinous process of the C2. You can see mandible. You can still see the nasopharynx, the buccal cavity and the spinal cord. Going another above, you can slowly see that the bifid spinous process is going. Now this is C1. So from C2 we have just one section above. This is C1. How do you say this is C1? Because there is no spinous process. You just see a ring and an arc. You see the arc. If I zoom in a little, you see the arc and the ring of the C1. You can also see the odontoid process. You can see the odontoid process mostly in next section. The spinal cord, the nasopharynx. You can see mandible both sides. You can now see the nasal septum. This is the nasal septum, the tip that you see, and the sinuses. We will go one more section above. C1 is slowly disappearing. You can make out the odontoid process. You can see thickening of the spinal cord. Is not thickening, it is going and forming, going to form the medulla, just going to enter the foramen magnum. You can see the nasal cavity much more. You can see the nasal cavity much more clearly. You can see the sinuses. This is the maxillary sinus. Okay, both the sinuses here of the face, over the cheeks, hollow, that is why they appear black. The nasal cavity, nasal septum is in the middle white, and the whole nasal cavity appears black because it is hollow, air filled. You can see the mandible. Now a section above it where you see the foramen magnum forming, the spinal cord entering, forming the medulla. You can just see the external auditory meatus forming at both the sides. You can see the TMJ in just front of it. You can see the sinuses empty and the whole nasal cavity still black and empty. Okay, I'll zoom in a little for you to see. Foramen magnum, spinal cord forming into medulla, the posterior base of the skull forming, external auditory meatus on either side. You see the angle of the TMJ joint forming here. Then the cheekbones, the sinuses in the front, the maxillary sinuses empty and hollow, black. Now you see the medulla is slowly joining the cerebellum. This is the cerebellum filling the posterior fossa of the skull. Cerebellum, you can see three divisions of the skull at this section. They are divided by the external auditory meatus. Okay, on either side you can see this hollow tube like air pockets. Okay, those are the external auditory meatus. Posteriorly is the posterior fossa of the skull. You can see the medulla in between. Then cerebellum just coming into picture. Still the nasal cavity and the sinuses appear black. This round spheres that you see are the orbits or the eyeballs. These are the orbits encompassing the eyeballs. Okay, and the three divisions that you see of the skull, this is the posterior fossa, and these are the temporal fossa where the temporal lobes will be accommodated. Another section, you see the eyes or eyeballs forming very well. Now you can make out the eyeballs, the nasal cavity still empty. Okay, the external auditory meatus much more visible. You can see the temporal fossas forming, the posterior fossa. You can see cerebellum more clearly now, and the pons, the spine ascending up into the medulla and just about to form pons. Okay, going a section more above. Yes. Okay, now you see the temporal lobes are just coming into picture in the temporal fossa. You can see the three divisions of the skull base very clearly. These are the areas behind the eyeball that you see that form the orbits, the nasal septum and the nasal canal still empty, the temporal fossa both bilaterally in the front, and posteriorly the cerebellum. You can see a extension with the eyeballs behind, that is the optic nerve. You can see external auditory meatus still hollow here. Okay, going more above. Okay, now you see when we have crossed the eye, these. Okay, now you can see three major areas here. This is the pons or okay, this is the pons, the medulla and the pons section here that you see, not that clear in this image. We'll see other scans also. Then posteriorly was the cerebellum. Slowly ascending above it is the occipital lobe. Then the two lobes that you see in the picture here, more like shaped butterfly, these are the temporal lobes, because the will go more above. Yeah, here you can see the midbrain or the pons area very clearly, joining with the posterior fossa or the occipital lobe is starting, both the temporal lobes. The frontal is just visible. The hollow space that you see at the front is the frontal sinus. This a region that you see is the frontal lobe just coming into picture. The temporal lobes, the frontal lobe, this is the pons and the brainstem region, and then this is the occipital region. Now you can see this is the midbrain forming. You see that butterfly shape kind of a thing. This is the midbrain forming. You can make out the temporal lobes differentiate so nicely with the sulci in between. Okay, You can read about all the different types of sulci and gyri that differentiate from lobes to lobes. Okay, you can see the midline forming now, separating both the hemispheres of the brain. Both hemispheres of the brain normally are a near mirror image anatomically, but physiology are completely different and perform different functions. So this is the posterior so this is the posterior occipital lobe, the temporal lobes at the side, the frontal lobe that you see, and this is the midbrain, more like a pons going and ascending into the thalamic and basal ganglia region. You can still see the frontal sinuses here. Okay, at this level you can see the frontal lobe formed well, then the temporal and the parietal coming into picture, the posterior, you can see the midline. When we go to the next section, yes, you can see 4 black dots here bilaterally across the midline. These black or dark grayish areas are the ventricles, because they are essentially filled with CSF, and CSF is close to water, and water is more clear and less dense, it appears black. So if it is filled with something, that means there is some lesion there. It may be blood or something else, but ideally it is all black. Okay, why do you see 4 dots first? Is because ventricles are placed like this in the brain. So you see the horns first. Those are also called ventral horns and dorsal horns of the ventricles. You see the horns first like this, then as you go above you see the body. So at this section we can see around the ventricles. So this is basically below the ventricle region when the horns are forming. This is the basal ganglia region, and below it will be the thalamic region, the frontal lobes, the temporal lobes still separated well, the occipital lobes, and then the midline. So a section above, here you can see the ventricles forming more clearly. The midline is still intact, the frontal lobes, temporal lobes, occipital lobe, and the ventricles. As you go above and above, yes, you can see that the ventricles form into kind of a butterfly shape. Okay, this is how ideally it should look. The midline is intact in the middle. At this section where the ventricles are formed, it is more temporal and parietal. So more parietal region, less temporal region was below. Here it is more parietal, frontal, and occipital. So as we go above and above, you can see both the hemispheres clearly. The midline, this is more parietal and frontal. Okay, and then same way we go to the end, the tip of the skull. Okay, this was about structures. I'll just brief out once about the structures again from the first section. Okay, so the first section, I'll go from posterior. So you see the spine first and determine which vertebrae it is. The bifid vertebrae says you this is C2, the spinal cord, the body of the vertebrae, then just in front the nasopharynx opening, very hypodense or black because it is air filled. Then bilateral the mandible, the buccal cavity, upper palate. Slowly as you rise above, go above in the sections, you see the C1 forming over the odontoid process. So this is the ring of the C1, there is no spinous process. Then you see the spinal cord, the nasopharynx, the external auditory meatus, the mandibles, the nasal septum. You see the sinuses empty because they are supposed to be empty, black. Yeah, as you go above and above, more section, you see the external auditory meatus forming. Finally the fossas of the skull base forming. You can see the sinus is black, the spinal cord ascending, to form medulla. This then the foramen magnum in the posterior aspect of the skull base. Then as you go higher, the medulla joining the cerebellum, then the cerebellum extending, the medulla extending into medulla, then pons, then temporal lobes appearing, the orbits appearing, the eyeballs appearing. You can see the optic nerve also. Then the nasal cavity is still black because it's supposed to be hollow. All the 3 fossas of the skull base. Okay, then all the lobes, the temporal lobes, posterior, then the midbrain. Then at this level the frontal lobe forming, the frontal sinus, the temporal lobes, the posteriorly occipital lobes forming. Then here you see the pons going and extending into thalamus. This is the thalamic, or this is the thalamic region, more frontal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. As you go higher and higher, forming of the ventricles, the midline in the middle, separating both the hemispheres, the basal, yeah, okay, yes, here is the basal ganglia region just below the ventricles, then all the four lobes. Then as you go higher and higher, you see the perfect butterfly shape of the ventricles, hollow, black, CSF filled, the midline intact. Okay, so this was about structures. Now let's do structures with symmetry. Now what we will focus more on is the structure symmetrical compared to the other half, because we know head as a whole is divided into two mirrors or two halves which are mirror images, at least structurally they are mirror images. Okay, so all the structures, the mandible, the spinous process, it does not look rotated in any way. The spinal cord looks symmetrical in the spinal column. You can draw imaginary line in between and then see the two halves look similar. As you go higher and higher, when we come to the level of C1, the nasal septum is not deviated, it is the same in central. Both the sinuses look at the same levels, symmetrical. The angle of mandible, or the mandibular ridge looks symmetrical and at the same place bilaterally. The vertebra does not look rotated at any aspect. The spinal cord looks straight, the vertebra looks straight, and both the halves are symmetrical. You can see the bone continuity very well. There does not seem to be any fractures. If there is a bone continuity loss, the fractures usually appears like a crack, that we all know, but there is loss of continuity and symmetry. Okay, as we go higher and higher, okay, at this level you see the external auditory meatus symmetrical bilaterally. The nasal cavity looks symmetrical bilaterally. Both the sinuses appear same bilaterally, they look similar. There is no deviation of angle. You see the bones also very well in continuity, there are no fractures. Then you see the foramen magnum symmetrical, straight, has not rotated to any sides. As we go higher and higher, okay, when we come to base of the skull, you see the clear demarcations of the three areas or fossa in the skull. They look similar bilaterally, there is no deviation. The eyes, the orbits, the eyeballs, the nasal cavity look similar. External auditory meatus and the mastoid air pockets look symmetrical bilaterally. Okay, here when the brain tissue appears, we start drawing an imaginary midline here. Now you compare at both sides of the midline. Bilaterally, by the over the midline, everything appears symmetrical and normal. The lobes appear symmetric and normal. There is no much deviation here. As we go higher and higher, the midline is intact. Bilaterally, the temporal lobes, the frontal and the posterior occipital lobes look symmetrical. There is no deviation. There is no shift of midline that we call. There is no swelling over one side. Okay, there is no as such abnormality. There are no color gradient changes. Nothing is more grayer than the brain tissue or more whiter than the brain tissue to see there is, to say or suspect that there is some lesion there. Okay, the midline is more or less intact here. The ventricles forming perfectly symmetrical, they seem. There is no deviation of the ventricles. No ventricle is bigger or smaller than the other. That can be signs of hydrocephalus that we will be seeing later. All the other lobes at this level also seem fine and symmetrical. The skull as a whole looks perfectly oval. No cracks are seen. That means there are no fractures suspected. The midline is in the middle. There are no deviations. There is no such abnormality that is seen. Okay, as we go higher and higher, cool, everything looks symmetrical. This was a normal brain scan. After this, we will be studying abnormalities. So what we saw is structure and symmetry. So you see section by section what all structures you can make out. I just gave you a brief. There is a lot more detail to it if you want to go back and learn. You can identify arteries, veins, you can identify nuclei, you can name the sulci and gyri and all the other areas of the brain tissues in detail. That is up to you if you want to go back and read. But as much as reading or interpreting the scan is concerned, this is a brief outline that works very well. Another thing, this large C that you see behind is the plate where the head is kept during the scan. That is not related to the body tissue, it is just the instrument. Okay, so we saw structure and we saw symmetry. Now we will go to abnormalities. Okay, coming to case 2. So I want you to, when I run the images of case 2 now, I want you to make out or see, don't note down anything, just listen and see the scans and try to make out the structures and if they are symmetrical, and if there are any color gradient changes, hyperdensity or hypodensity, that may suspect or give us any evidence of an abnormality. So we did symmetry and structures with a normal scan, now we are going to do abnormalities. Okay, before going into abnormalities, I just want to make one brief about the lesions. See, blood when it is out is more dense than the brain tissue because it starts clotting, so it appears white. If there is air leakage in the skull which pushes the brain, because it is air, it is very less dense, it appears black. Okay, and all the bleeds, the hematomas or hemorrhages mostly appear more whiter or hyperdense. Bleeding is hyperdense. Tumors and space occupying lesions are a little hyperdense, can be isodense together with the brain tissue because they are basically tumors there. Okay, if there is calcification, it appears white. Blood appears white. All white is called hyperdense, all black air is called hypodense. Brain tissue is isodense. Coming to case 2, we will see a scan. Now we will go the same way, we will go structures, then we will do symmetry, then we will see if there is abnormality. Okay, now they have started from the level of C1, there is no C2 here. You know this is C1 because you see a clear cut arch, you see the spinal process, there is no spinous process, you see the spinal cord there, you see the mandibles, and you see this is the maxilla, the teeth have been shown. Okay, you see the maxillary sinuses clear, the external auditory meatus and the mastoid air pockets clear, you see the cerebellum forming, the medulla is joining the cerebellum, the skull base, all the three forces are forming. Up till now it looks kind of clear and symmetrical. Okay, now see this section that we see. Okay, you see the eyes, the nasal septum is proper, the temporal lobes appearing seem okay, the bones seem okay, but as you see there are some white bright dots, so you will call this hyperdense areas in the brain tissue. So you see hyperdense white areas in the brain tissue, and also if you can see posteriorly, there is kind of a foggy or smoky effect over the cerebellum, just like a blurred out white patch here. This whole patch that you see, this is the normal brain tissue which you see here grayish, the normal brain tissue. If you compare that with the normal brain tissue, you see this is more brighter in color and more whiter at this section. So one thing we know is at the level of pons and cerebellum, okay, there is a bright white patch of something that is together with the brain tissue. Okay, we will not name it a bleed or something until then, we will see the whole abnormal. As we go higher, okay, you can still see a bright, patchy layer here. It's kind of a thin blurred out patchy white area here compared to the other brain tissues. You can see the midbrain forming. You can also see from the previous structure there is a thick white dot here. Okay, there is a thick white dot. Now that area is supposed to be black because that is essentially the fourth ventricle joining to the third ventricle between the cerebellum and the midbrain. That is the fourth ventricle. So it is supposed to have CSF there and is supposed to be black, but this is white. So something wrong is going on. Okay, we'll go move more higher. Okay, better. Now you see this area behind the midbrain has a complete white patchy effect, like of a painted or blurry smoky kind of patchiness. We'll go a little more. Yeah, it's more visible. Okay, cool. As you go higher and higher, you see the frontal lobes forming, the temporal lobe seems okay and symmetrical, the posterior also seems a bit symmetrical. Now you see the ventricles are forming. Now ideally the ventricles are supposed to be black. Let's see how they are in this scan. They are not. You see the ventricles are hyperdense, they seem hyperdense. There is something filled in the ventricle, can be blood, it can be blood because blood appears more white. So the ventricles are filled with this white abnormal tissue can be blood, you can see there is also hyperdensity or whiting in between the cerebral hemisphere, where there is supposed to be a space, the midline where the cerebrums are separated, both the cerebral hemispheres are separated. You see there is a white invagination or brightening there. As we go higher and higher, yes, you can see the ventricles are more filled with this white abnormality. Okay, we clearly have an abnormality here. The structures seem okay. You see the ventricles are slightly dilated, they are thicker than they normally should be. The midline still seems okay, not pushed to one side. The structures are okay, the symmetry okay-ish, but there is a definite abnormality, and you will not call this something white, you call this hyperdense. So we see until where it is. Okay, it is also involving more of the parietal region. As you go higher, we'll start from below. Now we'll focus only on the abnormality. Okay, as we go below, you don't see anything here, don't see anything here. In the next section, until the foramen magnum, we don't see anything. As soon as we cross the foramen magnum and ascend a little into the cerebellar sections, you see there is white patchiness across the cerebellum, and there is hyperdensity. So there is hyperdensity across the cerebellar layer, and there is hyperdensity at the place of the fourth ventricle where it should not be there. That hyperdensity is slowly ascending in between the cerebrum. Okay, so in between the cerebral hemispheres it is extending, and then it is extending more from the ventricle. You see the point of the ventricle, you can follow the ventricle clearly where my arrow is. It is extending from the ventricles, from the fourth ventricles, then slowly extending into the third ventricles, then bilaterally extending into the ventricles, filling the ventricles, and then one half of the whole ventricle is gone in this section, it is filled with that. As you go higher and higher, there is also parietal hyperdensity. Now let's try to report this. Let's understand what this can be. Okay, one thing we are sure of it, it is something more brighter. It can be blood because it is more diffused in the area. It cannot be tumors. Okay, it can be a bleed that has started from somewhere. The first point that we see is the cerebellum, so it can be somewhere from the cerebellum, but you don't see the bleed inside the cerebellar tissue as such. Okay, so we'll make sure in a different scan. This was one view of the scan. We know there is some bleeding going on from the fourth ventricle covering the cerebellum, going up, extending up to the ventricles and covering covering the whole, almost the whole left ventricle, and also extending into the parietal region. Okay, this was the transverse section of the scan. Now we'll see the sagittal section of the scan to understand how far or what is the extent of the bleed. You cannot just comment or report a scan based on one view or one layer or one section. This was a transverse that we saw. Then coming on to the sagittal scan, as we go inside more and more, yes, you see the hyperdensity there. You see the fourth ventricle, the hyperdensity inside the ventricle. If you can see, there is a thin line separating the cerebral hemisphere from the cerebellum. There is blood between that. You can see the smoky effect all over the cerebrum here, over the cerebellum. If we go more into the depths, yes, here you can see the fourth ventricle. There is definitely a bleed that is coming. There is some abnormality there that is extending from the ventricle to the third ventricle. As we go higher, you can clearly see the flow of the abnormality. It is collected here in the fourth ventricle, then it clearly flows into the lateral ventricles and fills them up. Fascinating, right? It's amazing. Okay, we'll go back again. So in that scan, you got to know that there is some abnormality going. When you change the view, you understand better the extent of it and how widespread it is. Okay, you can follow the arrow. We'll do it again. See, it starts here at the ventricle and slowly extends and flows into the lateral ventricles and fills them up. it fills them up. You can see the cerebellum clearing here. Okay, and now you see there is a thin layer, of white abnormality that is invaginating in the sulci and gyri. You can see the hyperdensity is also covered the sulci and gyri. There is a pia mater completely stuck to the brain. Then there is arachnoid and the dural layer, dura mater, which is the outermost. Now, if there is a bleed, there are two possibilities. There are three possibilities of the blood to collect inside the skull. It can either collect below the arachnoid, the bleed in the brain tissue. That is completely that is a different. This that is not that does not relate to the dura. It relates to the brain parenchyma itself. When it comes to the dura, so there are intraparenchymal bleeds. You see a whole bleed here that is inside the brain tissue with the brain tissue, or the brain can collect below the arachnoid, called the subarachnoid hematoma or the subarachnoid hemorrhage if it is acute. If it is subacute or chronic, it clots and forms a hematoma. It can be above the arachnoid, below the arachnoid, and it can be above the arachnoid. Okay, it can be above the arachnoid, making it the subdural, below the dura mater, the meningeal layer, the dura mater, but above the arachnoid is subdural. Below the arachnoid in the subarachnoid space is subarachnoid hemorrhage. So subarachnoid hemorrhage, below the dura but above the arachnoid is subdural. Then above the dura is extradural. Extradural is basically between the skull, the periosteal layer, and the meningeal layers or the dura mater. So how do you differentiate between all these three? You see where the blood is going. Now one thing we know is this is definitely blood, it is hyperdense. But how do you know if it is a subarachnoid hemorrhage along the brain or subdural hemorrhage? You keep in mind the meningeal layers. If it is below the arachnoid, it can enter into the sulci and gyri. It can cover the whole brain tissue, not go inside the brain tissue to cover there. So if there is blood within the sulci and gyri but not necessarily into the brain tissue and below the meninges, it is subarachnoid, because if there is a bleed below the arachnoid, it can invaginate or enter into the sulci and gyri. If there is a bleed which is covering the meningeal layer above the brain, below the skull, it looks more like a crescent moon or like a banana shape. Okay, but is not entering the sulci and gyri. You can see the sulci and gyri but pushed to one side, but it is spread out below the skull like a thin crescent of the moon. It is subdural because there is a lot of subdural space for the blood to just flow or spread around the brain, but it will never come into the sulci and gyri until unless there is a meningeal tear. That is not scope of the talk today. Okay, so there is subarachnoid, you see blood in sulci and gyri too, and there is subdural, the sulci and gyri you can see, but the brain is pushed to one side and the bleed spreads out below the skull more like a crescent of a moon or like a banana shape. That is subdural. Now extradural is completely outside the dura mater, and below the skull periosteal layer there is very little space for the blood to move around. So what it does is it just blows up there like a balloon or like a large lemon or a ball and pushes the brain to one side. So if you see a bleed or a lesion which is blown up like a ball or a balloon and pushing the brain to one side between the skull and the brain, it is extradural. So extradural bleed appears more like a ball or a balloon. Subdural has space to distribute itself, so it appears more like a crescent moon or a banana shape. And subarachnoid bleeds usually invaginate, the blood invaginates into the sulci and gyri and above the brain tissue. So it appears diffused, smoky, blurred out kind of a tissue. So what we see here is a smoky kind of effect, a blurred out kind of effect. You see this effacement, the sulci and gyri invagination causes edema to form or the brain to swell up. That is also called as effacement of sulci and gyri, where you cannot see the sulci and gyri, cannot make them out, and it is all blurred out. So you see a smoky kind of a layer here. Okay, hyperdensity is seen over the cerebellum or posteriorly, and the temporoparietal regions more over the left than the right, and there is that hyperdensity can be suggestive of subarachnoid hemorrhage. That hemorrhage also is extending into the ventricle. So what you report is hyperdensity seen in the posterior aspects over the cerebellum or posterior aspects of the brain, and the temporoparietal regions wherever it is more right or left. So suggestive of, because you know it is going into the brain tissue, suggestive of subarachnoid hemorrhage, and together with intraventricular extension of the bleed. You see the bleed is extending into the ventricles, okay, and the ventricles are also dilated a little. So you can see there is hydrocephalus forming because there is obstruction of the CSF because of the blood. So when you report the scan, okay, let's just summarize everything. We saw there is blood, we saw there is a smoky layer going and invaginating into the sulci and gyri. We suggest it is blood and it is extending into the ventricle. So when you report hyperdensity seen posteriorly together in the temporal and parietal lesions, suggestive of subarachnoid hemorrhage, okay, and when you see the layers here, you can also see the brain pushed to one side here over the left aspect. When you see the bleed has gone out at the over the brain tissue, if you clearly see, if I'll zoom a little, you can clearly see when there is bleed here in the frontal region, you cannot make out the sulci and gyri, but on the other side, on the left side of the image, you can make out. So this is suggestive of cerebral edema. So hyperdensity posteriorly, occipital temporoparietal hyperdensity suggestive of subarachnoid hemorrhage, and extending into the ventricle, that is called an intraventricular extension, together with signs of subdural hemorrhage over the left frontal and temporoparietal regions. Also there are signs of cerebral edema. Okay, we have four things now. We have subarachnoid hemorrhage that we suspect, intraventricular extension of the bleed, subdural hemorrhage can also be there, that seems acute because we see the blood is white still, so it is acute. If it was darker clotted, it would have been more grayer, and we see cerebral edema. So there are four things we are sure of. Let's see if we can correlate with the report. Okay, yeah, so the first thing, yes, there is subarachnoid hemorrhage in the sulci of bilateral parietal lobes, one right thing. Subdural hemorrhage in the falx cerebri. Okay, falx cerebri is the region where both the hemispheres are differentiating into the two halves anteriorly at the frontal lobes. Okay, so there is second thing, right? There is subarachnoid hemorrhage, subdural hemorrhage in the falx cerebri, extending to tentorium cerebri, that is the region of the below the hemisphere that you can read about. Intraventricular hemorrhage. Okay, so intraventricular hemorrhage in the body and occipital horn of lateral ventricles, third and fourth ventricles, extending to the posterior subarachnoid space of visualized portion of the spinal canal. Matlab it is extending over the cerebellum until the spinal canal. So all the three things that we suggest or suspected in the scan are right. So this is how you interpret a scan. You see the structure, you see the symmetry, and you see abnormality, then you correlate the abnormality. Is it diffuse? It can be blood. If it is non-diffuse, it can be tumor.